It's Dieter and Hutch. And we're coming to you on a day that will not be named in locations that are pretty apparent to anyone who has watched us before. And we're going to talk about safeties, which are destiny, Jake. I'm not sure if you've heard me say that before, but safeties are destiny, and the 49ers need themselves at least one new safety this offseason. And we're coming to the fine folks out there, the SICKOS, with suggestions, with cases, with elevator pitches for safeties at both the pro and the college level. What more could you want, my friend?
Nothing. And listen, safeties as destiny has almost become a bit at this point.
It's so true, though.
It is true. They matter, and they matter more and more and more. And when you watch some of these guys and what they're asked to do, and we were talking about it before we started, like safety, I think, is probably outside of quarterback the toughest position to evaluate because
particularly for a lay person who doesn't have access to all 22 stuff.
Right. Because every scheme is different. Every ask of a safety is different on every single play. Yeah. And there's a lot of decisions that aren't like black or white. Like some positions, it's like you do this or you don't do this. Mm-hmm. And like safety, there's a million different factors. And sometimes like a tight end like Travis Kelce, running and not running an actual play or running a route.
Right.
It's like, well, what was I supposed to do there? Because he didn't do what he was supposed to do. So
going rover, coach.
Right.
Going rover.
So safety, I think, can be a really tricky one to evaluate. But we have some traits we look for, and we'll try and sift through all of it. But it is definitely a really tough spot.
It is. I mean, obviously, in my opinion, it's a vital position. You have to have it right if you want to have a successful football team. As we were also discussing before we came on the air, I mean, maybe we should just record our entire lives at this point. It's equally as difficult to evaluate as maybe a quarterback. And some of the things that you just mentioned, like think about how difficult it is to evaluate linebackers because sometimes they have convoluted responsibilities and difficult rules. Just add more space to that and more possible responsibilities. And the highlight tapes can tell you one thing. And listen, I'm not disparaging the fine folks who have terrible music taste to put together NFL draft highlight films. Like they're a valuable resource. Right. But it is so tough to get a read at any level, NFL or college, hell, even I'm sure at the preps level, without seeing the full field and understanding how they impact a game, right? There's a feel to a great safety.
And there's the thing of the reality is like, a lot of the time, safeties are just not involved. There's a lot of plays where they're just like waiting for something to happen. They didn't need me. Right. And depending on scheme, you might have a guy who's just basically playing single high center field and isn't involved. And you're like, is he not in, like, should he be doing more? Or is this just, he's just called to play single high and there's no way to get involved here? And you can sift through that and decide, like, there's different ways, like, the guy can play single high and the way he's tracking routes and the way he's flipping his hips and all that. There's a lot of different things. But sometimes there is like a lack of involvement that you just got to be patient and really comb through it all.
So let's start with the pros, and let's be blunt about this from the jump. Not a great free agent class for pro safeties. Now, we know that this market has been, I would say, artificially deflated over the years. It feels like safeties are consistently underpaid relative to
very tough market.
Totally. And so, and some hard bargains have been driven with free agents there. I would say the best free agent safety, if we're just going off of like a PFF grade, and the guy who had the best season overall was like Tony Jefferson, who's like 33 years old.
He came out of retirement. I mean, on the free agent market, I made like a short tier list. I have, it's like Justin Reed is like just sort of barely at the top.
He's a great player.
Great. I've liked him for a long time.
Yeah.
I would put Javon Holland up there, but he's had injuries. He's had a lot of injuries, and I worry about that. So I have him and Jeremy Chin kind of a tier below.
And then Jeremy Chin. But like also, there's also, you have to take into account here, the Commanders have the money to spend, and he had a great year. Like, why wouldn't they bring him back?
Exactly. And then outside of that, then you're looking at veterans. And there's always like an abundance of veteran safeties, and they're always flawed in a number of ways. You got an abundance of like 32-year-olds. We're like, I've been playing safety for 15 years.
I'm really good at this. Please pay me money to come play for your football team.
Yeah. And so I have in that good tier that I'm looking at, there's a bunch of guys, but I had Eric Murray. from Houston, and
Talk to me about Eric Murray.
So I'll show you guys Eric Murray, because we're going to go through and we're going to name some of the guys we really like here. Eric Murray is my guy. I was initially on Quandre Diggs.
Okay,
I was on,
and we know Quandre Diggs, of course, from his time with Seattle and his ability to impact play. Like, Diggs is a very good player. Is he still that kind of guy?
Yeah, so he's had injury issues. He had a Liz Frank injury, which, listen, Liz Franks are rough.
Like that.
And he really regressed with Seattle. Had a decent year last year, but also I was watching, and he played a lot of terrible quarterbacks. He played like Malik Willis and Joe Flacco and Tyler
you mean
Huntley.
Super Bowl winner Joe Flacco and Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley?
I know. All right, we're moving on here. But this is we're gonna watch Eric Murray here. He's right over here. This is him coming down in the run game. Really, just a lovely that this is against the Bears. Just gonna slip around a pretty lame attempt at a block there. That would be DJ Moore, folks. Not ideal.
Not a blocker.
No, not a blocker. And some teams ask more of the receivers than other. But you get a lot of stuff from Eric Murray. So he's going to be up here on this play, and you're going to watch him. And this is just like, this is not anything crazy, but he's just tracking, right? Because a lot of the time you watch him and he's in the slot. So I wanted some clips where he wasn't just in the slot. You're going to watch him. I believe, I want to say this is a wheel route against Dalton Kincaid.
Those fucking Houston uniforms.
Really ugly. So this is like a kind of a tough cover, and Dawson Knox here should probably be getting some sort of contact, some incidental contact, or trying to slow him down. But he navigates it fairly well, and it's a tough assignment. Kincaid's pretty quick, but he stays close with him.
That's a really nice play.
I'd say it's a really nice play. And then moving forward, we got a couple more here. This is him in the slot against Rome Odunze. Just no separation for Rome. I really liked what he did. Really liked what he did against Odunze. And then you're going to get one more play from him here. This is him.
Michael Pittman.
Bring it back here. This is him against Michael Pittman in the slot. So right over here, and Michael Pittman's a good, strong receiver. Just nowhere. Just literally. And Pittman, it doesn't look like is trying to do anything crazy. But that's kind of what you get from Eric Murray. You get a guy who's coming down. He gets moved around a lot by the Texans, and they have they had Jimmy Ward, and they've got Jalen Petrie.
Love Jalen Petrie.
They've got some guys who are multiple, and so he's not being used as a single high. Like most of that is Petrie. He's being used as single high occasionally, but for the most part, I see him moved around. He's in the slot. He's in the box. He's doing a lot of different things. And I think why I chose him over Quandre Diggs is like Diggs is pure center fielder. That's really all you're asking him to do is play single high and just roam and cut down angles. And what I worry about there is, one, he's like undersized and older, and he's had some injury issues. And both these guys should be cheap, by the way. Both these guys are like, $2 to $3 million.
And beyond the general specter of cheapness as it pertains to safeties, like cheap for even safeties.
We're talking like $2-3 million, I think, for either one of these guys, veteran safeties over the age of 30. And Diggs being undersized, having injury issues. I would like a guy who can do a little bit more. I think Murray can play free safety if you ask him to do that. And I think just having a little bit more size than Diggs, having the ability to fill a little bit more confidently in the run game, and being able to clearly like cover a lot of different types of receivers from the slot, I think that's really valuable. And I think Robert Saleh would really value that. A guy we talked about was Ashton Davis, and he used him a little bit similarly.
That would be my guy from this pro crop, in that he's what a crop. We goose him up a little bit, but Ashton Davis is unspectacular. Okay, no one's going to be knocking down the doors yelling that Ashton Davis is an all-pro or a Pro Bowl or anything like that. But what he is exceptionally competent. You can play him anywhere on the field. He'll give you a good rep. He's not going to dominate any reps. He's not going to pop off the film. But you're not going to be looking at him and going, what the hell is Davis doing? Ever. You never say that. And he's just a quality player. He's good in the run game, better in the run game than he probably gets credit for. And solid, though unspectacular, probably a little tight in the hips in the pass game.
They used him basically as a third linebacker a lot of the time.
Now, we're in an interesting spot because you were mentioning a lot of the versatility there and how I think you and I are both on the same wavelength of we're valuing that moving forward. It'll be interesting to see, and I get the sense, again, we haven't been around Robert Saleh on a weekly, day-to-day basis for a couple of years now. So there's obviously further evolution from when we last saw him at the end of the 2020 season. Did we even see him then? Not really, because the world was on fire. But he went from a strict cover 3 when he first showed up in San Francisco. The rules of the cover 3, classic, Legion of Boom, Seattle. We have 3 linebackers. One of them is a safety.
No one's traveling. Richard Sherman is staying on one side. You got Emmanuel Mosley on the other.
They were militant. There was a dogmatic approach to how they ran cover 3. These are the rules. We do not change the rules. As his career with the Niners progressed, his first stint progressed, he became more open to the concept of too high safety. In some cases, big nickel they did sometimes with more. So there were some evolutions there that obviously have continued with the Jets because they were not a strict cover 3 team nor a strict cover 2 team. I'm interested to see how they handle this now because Kyle wants to probably be more cover 3 than certainly too high. So single high more than too high. And they have a guy in Malik Mustafa who is clearly a stud and deserves every snap you can give him and an impact player. But he's not exactly a strong safety and he's not exactly a free safety. He's a true versatile safety, probably leaning more towards strong than free because he's certainly not a free.
In the literal sense, although I do think he has like the speed and ability to play free. But you're right. I would agree.
The instincts are there, but he's not that center fielder you were talking about with Diggs or a guy that I was into at the trade deadline, an Andre Cisco, who is strictly a center fielder. I mean, it is just full Jim Edmonds. I don't play any other position, but I'm catching everything out here. He's the Jung-Hoo Lee of
nice.
Thank you. Baseball season. What a joy it's going to be. So I don't like that either because then you can't get to the support in the run game. So you need the versatility, not just tactically, but also I think for, just being a well-rounded football player. And I'll sacrifice a little bit of expertise in one area, be it against the run or certainly against the pass. Because if you're talking just against the run, well, now congrats, you have Talanoa Hufanga, who can't do anything for you against the pass and has to play the hook, flat, curl all day long because he can't get to that second level. That's a linebacker. And you're playing him at safety, that's an issue. Teams are going to exploit that. So I like that versatility. We've talked a lot on the show over the past year about how defenses have figured out, there are no rules on our side of the ball. We can rush 0. We can rush 11. We can be running around in circles ad nauseum before the ball is snapped. There are no rules.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain amount of guys on the line. You can't have 2 guys in motion at the same time. There are a lot of rules on how an offense sets up, and the defenses have finally figured out, we can do whatever we want. And some defensive coordinators have really taken advantage of that. I call them the chaos defenses, the Mike McDonald Ravens more than Seahawks, certainly the Brian Flores. I think Spags with his corner blitz. So if we wanted to figure out what day we're recording this, Spag with his corner blitz in the AFC Championship game, a great example of just there are no rules.
And he always dials that up.
Totally. And they brings it at the best time. So Robert Saleh, smart guy, you'd imagine that he's going to integrate some of these things now that he's in a position of extreme job security. And in that, you're going to need versatile defensive players. You have one already with Amador Lenore. I think you have one with Mufasa. Fred Warner's as versatile as they get. We'll see with the other linebacker spot. We've already talked about that. So Ashton Davis, a versatile player, a nice, safe option that Robert Saleh has experience with, would fit in. And he probably starts, but then you also draft a corner or a safety somewhere early-ish. Right? Looking for that deep future so that you're not playing the game that the Niners have been playing now for 8 years of, we only have one safety. We need to go find somebody on a Disney cruise.
They tried to solve that with Jair Brown. It's just looking clearer and clearer like he's not the answer. And maybe that changes.
Maybe the scheme changes,
Maybe he fits. Yeah. I don't know. It was really rough last year to the point that it's hard for me to believe he'll ever be the answer there.
So along those lines, a name that's getting a lot of buzz right now on the college level, and safety, again, a very tough position, but it's Nick Emmanwori from South Carolina. And people are looking at him. You want to talk about versatility. 6'3", 227, as you can see on the screen for the podcast listeners. I don't need to repeat it. He is physically impressive, right? At the safety position, for someone to be this big and to have this level of straight line speed, as you can see on a lot of his interceptions, the 4 that he had past year. He had 2 pick sixes. That's no accident, right? He gets some of those. One of them was like 90 yards. Yeah. Like it isn't. You cannot catch him. He'd be a great returner. Not that you would ever use him there, but like he could be. And I gotta say, there's a lot of buzz about him on the first round. And before I got my hands on some sweet all 22 South Carolina tape, I could have bought into it. In fact, I'll just full disclosure, I did buy into it because you see the highlights, you see the hits, you see the interceptions, and you go, wow, at that size, that could be a really special player. Then you turn on the real tape. I wouldn't touch him in the first 2 rounds. I'm wearing a Red Wings hat right now. Love hockey. Jake, I'm telling you, this is every hockey player you've ever hated. He is just floating out there on the ice. We talk about guys who have a fast trigger, great play recognition, explode to the ball, operate in straight lines. He does none of those things. And I'll give him some benefit of the doubt, but I put on the game against Missouri, which has a outside zone run game, a lot of RPO, at least 2 NFL wide receivers, including a first rounder, a fringe, probably not going to make any roster, but we'll get to camp quarterback, and a really good offensive line. You go, that's a pretty good facsimile of what you're going to get at the NFL level. And he looked lost. He had 11 tackles in that game. Not one of them felt impactful. He was just kind of right place, right time, accidental. He did not make an imprint on the game from my vantage point when I finally got the good tape. So Nick Emmanwori, incredible possibilities. Wouldn't shock me in the least bit if he got to an NFL team and it all clicked, and with the right coaching, he becomes an absolute beast. But I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on it anywhere outside. In the top 100, I would feel very reluctant because you need an immediate impact player, and he needs a lot of work on everything that's not his corporal form. Then there's Xavier Watts, who I think is a day 2 talent. This is not a good safety class. We got to be blunt about this. Xavier Watts, Notre Dame safety. Well, okay, we can disagree.
No. I'm not saying the class as a whole.
Okay. So Xavier Watts I would have as my second graded safety as we speak. He's got everything you could possibly want when it comes to between the ears, right? Great play recognition, tough as nails, operates in straight lines, sees attacks. You want that missile mentality, right? That's what the great safeties have. Recognize, detonate. He has that. He just doesn't have the same body as a guy like Nick Emmanwori, where he has those loose hips, where he has the height, where he has the weight, and that he can fly around the field. So you put them together, they'd be the greatest safety of all time. Problem is they're 2 separate dudes. I would take the instinct of a Watts over the physical upside of an Emmanwori. It all brings me to this. There is one first-round graded safety in this class. It is not particularly close. It's Malachi Starks from Georgia, who I'm not even going to show you the good stuff on Malachi Starks from Georgia, Jake. I'm going to show you just 3 random-ass plays that give you an indication of how special this kid can be. So let's first get the big one up here. Okay, so here's Malachi Starks. You can see him with my cursor. Apologies to the podcast listeners. He's just up here. They lined him up a lot against dudes in the slot. Now, this is a playoff quarterfinal. You can see it right there on the field against Notre Dame. This is a big game.
Yep.
This play has nothing to do with him. Watch this kid scoot as Notre Dame brings a guy in motion. Can't teach that straight line speed.
And what I was saying when you show me this clip is, I think why that's an incredibly crucial thing. Not just that it's cool, but like that is exactly the sort of thing that, like, on a 3rd or 4th and short, when you go against a team like the Chiefs,
100%.
where they line up and you set up like it's going to be, a QB sneak or something, which I feel like they never actually run and then teams sell out for it. But when they run like a quick boot and they have an option, to throw something,
they love that
flat
shove
or something
pass
across,
or the orbit motion.
Like they'll have like a rub and have somebody coming across and someone gets free. And this sort of stuff, this sort of speed and the ability to navigate through traffic while traveling at a high speed and staying basically parallel to your wide receiver on the other side of the line of scrimmage, that is what allows you to cover somebody on a play that will define a game.
Right, 100%. I mean, and teams are looking specifically to get into those man-to-man looks where you bring the safety in, right? They'll split out the tight end, as Notre Dame was doing here. I mean, they were looking to exploit, right? We're going to get single high, so we have to bring this guy down. We're going to bring him a man-to-man. We're going to make him run around away from the play, and we're going to make that now single high safety have to make a decision, but we're going to throw 2 guys at him. I mean, the entire play is predicated on that. But when you have the ability to blow stuff up because you have the physical skill set to match a wide receiver, not a tight end, a wide receiver, stride for stride, that's a big deal. And we're going to see that here.
Yep.
Where, again, just in the slot against the wide receiver, here's just a slant. And I don't think that play was ever going to, I believe, number 4 here.
Right.
But you can just see he's right there. He's covering him like a cornerback.
That first step and the way he flips his hips to immediately be running full speed in his hip pocket, that's elite.
It's elite level stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have to take into account.
That's the sort of talent that like prevents you from, like, when you're a safety in the red zone, it prevents you from getting cooked on a little slant route.
Mm-hmm. Then we have him up here, too high, classic stuff. And again, these are unremarkable plays. These are not highlights. This is just 3 random plays that I saw in one of the biggest games of the entire college football season.
That's also the reality of playing safety, right? It's not every play's not going to be remarkable. It's about the stuff you don't see where it's like, I don't know how good this guy is. It's like, well, a lot of the time you're not going to see it because You're right.
He looks awesome on plays that don't look awesome. That's a really good sign. And that's, the opposite of an Emmanwori, right? Where you watch him and you're like, what is he doing? Is he even aware of what the plays are? Like Jake, I'm flummoxed. I mean, I'm a little angry about it because I kind of feel like I got bamboozled. Okay, so here he is, just too high safety, run play. Okay, gets there, checks off of the guy, finishes the tackle, right? Nothing special about that, but this is a solid rep. No safeties coach, no DBs coach is ever going to complain about engage, throw him off. It wasn't a great block, but like, I'm going to get in there. Yeah. I'm going to make something happen. He's got a nose for it. Most safeties you watch at the college level, here's where they stop. Right here. They go, these other guys got it.
And there's a lot of safeties that are really light and can just get pushed around as soon as there's contact.
That's a big wide receiver. Like, that's Notre Dame. That's the reason
Notre Dame loves a big wide receiver.
That's why I put on the Notre Dame game, right? They have 2 NFL caliber coordinators. They have big boys, right? They don't operate with, super spread out. Like, they're gonna play a real NFL style game, which is why their players have such easy correlation to it. But listen, Malachi Starks at 11, I would have no problem with it. Not at all. Now, I think that in all likelihood, you can trade down a little bit if they need more capital. You don't think so? You think that he'd go in the top 15?
We'll see how this process goes, but in a draft that there's like a lot of, and usually there's like a weird quarterback thing where even though there's like, I don't think any of these quarterbacks should really go in the top 10.
I don't have a first-round grade on any of them.
Shador and Cam Ward are probably just going to go just by the nature of it, and someone might sneak up in the process. Somebody might freak out and be like, Will Howard's a top 10 thing. Like, you don't know.
He was so accurate.
Teams get so desperate for quarterbacks. I kind of like Will Howard.
I kind of like Will Howard too. That's the worst part, Jake. I'm thinking, Will Howard, like round 4 seems like kind of a win to me. And we'll get into quarterback.
Big quarterback who can move and like, I don't know.
He could deliver it. I watched him and Dylan Gabriel at the Rose Bowl firsthand, and I go, I know which one of these 2 quarterbacks is better. And Dylan Gabriel had a hell of a year. So listen, if you wanted to, let's say it's at 11, let's say it's at 20, let's say it's anywhere in between, right? You don't need to galaxy brain it. If you go about doing that, you have a real shot of having 2 unbelievably elite safeties In Starks and Mustafa, that might be the best safety crew in football by 2026.
I don't disagree at all. I'm going through with the presumption that they will not spend that highly on a safety.
You're right.
I
think you should for this kid. But this is the only guy with the true first-round grade that I have.
I don't disagree with you at all. I'm presuming that the 49ers won't go that route. I'm looking at Sebastian Castro out of Iowa. I was looking at their other safety, Xavier Watts, and I was like, he's not doing it for me. He's got size, but he's kind of like Emmanwori, where you're like, do you want to play?
Just floating.
And this guy, Sebastian Castro, you're gonna watch him. This guy wants to play. This guy wants to murder. Boom, boom.
He's awesome.
He is sick. He is a guy that, like, you watch this guy, and he wants to get involved on every single play. Boom. Oh, look at that. Look at that form.
He's a surefire tackler. He fires, man. You want to talk about a trigger.
And the thing is, like, when you watch the 49ers and what didn't work, I think with Jair Brown, like, it's the lack of trigger. It's the lack of aggression and going. It's like he's thinking about it too much.
It's a tentativeness. And he plays tentatively.
He did trigger, but the angles weren't right, and there was a hesitation there. And I think with this guy and with Mustafa, it's like, they are playing like their life doesn't matter, and like they believe they're going to make it every single time. So this is going to be a pick from Sebastian Castro. Really, really nice pick. Like, you're going to watch him up.
I thought you were just saying you like Will Howard.
Yeah, I am watching Will. I do like Will Howard, and we're watching him as a lefty here. Last clip here. This is, just picks up the guy coming out of the backfield. Great tackle.
So it's interesting on him because if you are somebody who is, if Robert Saleh comes in and goes, I really like Talanoa Hufanga, but I just can't do it because the injury and the play as of late has just been bad. He's a linebacker. He's a Sam linebacker in the modern NFL, and we just can't do it anymore. Castro feels like a very similar player when it comes to that thump, that impact that Hufanga can bring. But he does have a little bit more, though I don't know if it's requisite, but he has a little bit more ability to cover in space.
Dude, his coverage ability is actually really impressive to me. I don't know, when I speak about coverage ability, I'm talking about him in the box and especially in the slot. I see Iowa using him a lot like that. And sort of in, college, they have sort of like Fred Warner, like weird star roles where you're playing like an off linebacker in the middle of nowhere.
Things like
that.
Yeah.
It's not, you're like an outside linebacker. You're kind of a safety. You're just in this no man's land. Used a lot like that. Played a fair amount of press, quite honestly. And I see him playing really well in press. And I see him able to cover different types of receivers. I need to see how he tests. I need to see more fluidity. I don't know about the center fielding capability. That's my biggest question mark with him. And there are bad moments for sure, but against the best team in the country, Ohio State, he looked
big game,
phenomenal. Yeah. And he looked like a guy that's really cerebral, like play action, reads it, reacts, knows exactly where the guy's going to be targeted. And not like one of those guys where he flies downhill and he misses the tackle. Like, he's making every single tackle. He has really sure hands. And I think he's pretty strong. Like, initially, I thought he was a smaller player. He might only be 5'11", but he plays.
He's wide.
He I think he's got long arms, and he's a really sure tackler. I like him a lot. Now, what round are we talking about? I have to see how he tests a little bit more, but I would say 3 to 5. Yeah. 3 at the earliest, probably 5 at the latest for me. If it could be later depending on how testing goes, but I think he's going to test better than not.
It will be really interesting because the the deficiencies are plainly obvious, and there is a level of concern just coming from an Iowa defense that plays so close to the line of scrimmage. But I think it's great that you pulled up the Ohio State film, right? Ohio State's pushing the ball down the boundaries, down the sidelines, like they're not messing around when it comes to the deep game, and he had an awesome game against it. He was the best player on a defense that was pretty damn good for Iowa this year. He was unquestionably the best player in that game, and he brings a thump. He brings that sort of ineffable energy that you have to have, I think, from a safety. Linebackers and safeties have to bring that kind of thump or you don't really have a defense.
I talked to Fred Warner about that before last season, and some of the rule changes like the hip drop tackle, and it was.
Did you ever see one called, by the way?
I don't think so. I feel like they just fined guys occasionally, and they sort of stayed away from it.
That's right. Because I saw a million hip drop tackles.
I did too, but there's like 4 different elements of it that have to be done in the exact order, or it doesn't count. It's very specific, very prescriptive.
It's like saying Beetlejuice 3 times in a row.
Exactly. But Warner's like, and it sort of felt like he was talking from the Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans lens of, he's like, you have to continue to bring violence to the game. And as much as there's like a lot of incredible tactical things you can do, at the end of the day, especially when you get to like Chiefs, Bills, violence at the line of scrimmage, in the trenches, and being someone who's like, I'm going to throw every fiber of my being into this game, and I'm willing to lose every fiber of my being because football's a violent, brutal sport, and I'm with that. That matters.
It's interesting because I think our evolution, or I'll speak only to myself here, our evolution on this position and on defense in general is that I think both of us were very keen on the athleticism aspect. You have to have super athletes on the field. And that is certainly the case. Like, you can't throw me or you out there and just say, hey, do you want it more?
Especially like defensive end, linebacker has to have a high floor.
And I think safety to a degree as well. But there is something to be said. There's a requisite amount of athletic skill. But there are some positions, and I think safety is one of them, where you have to have a feel for the game. And you have to be able to play instinctually. And this is the big separation between a guy like Jair Brown, who looks like he's flaming out of the league right now, and a guy like Malik Mustafa. I don't think there's a physical difference, even though Mustafa is frighteningly ripped.
But Jair's like not like a light safety. Like, he can.
No, he's a big boy, and he can move. His problem is that I hate to go in on him because he is such a nice guy, and maybe that's his real issue.
I love Jair Brown. I wish he played better.
Right, but he thinks it through on every play. And Malik Mustafa made some bad plays this year, but he committed full bore to what he saw. He read and he reacted. You cannot spend your entire play reading, and you have to react with certainty. And the consequences be what the consequences are. Like, it is just that it is too fast and too athletic of a game on the offensive side. It is too rigged of a sport towards the offensive side to play as if you want to be in 2 places at one time. You have to go to the other place on the straightest, most direct line and deliver violence, or you will be eaten alive.
It's like Kaiir Elam, the Bills' backup cornerback, who's terrible, who's playing 8 yards off, and the Chiefs are like, well, we are the most pragmatic team in existence, so we're going to take the 6 yards you're giving us every single time.
That's right.
Until we're in the end zone.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into corners because corner is, you want to talk about a very difficult position to evaluate. So we got our work cut out for us. But in summation, we're going to go, who did you have? Who was your pro? Who was your collegiate?
So I had Eric Murray as my safety. Again, I think that's going to be, he cost less than $2 million last year. I would bet he does not cost more than $3 million this year. I would feel $2.5 million. I'd feel good about that. Yeah. Safety, Sebastian Castro. It feels 4th round. Gut feels like he's a 4th round pick. And I do think that's a position, just like defensive tackle, that they should double dip.
I agree with that. And let's also throw this in on Castro. You're buying yourself an elite special teams player off the jump. That man was built to play special teams. I don't know about the whole safety thing. I think it could work out for him because he's pretty good at it.
Yep.
There is no question that he is going to be an elite special teamer. And so you can even convert him into a linebacker if you have to. But he will be an elite special teams player. Niners certainly can use upgrades there. So if you can get depth who you don't have questions, like, do I have to teach him special teams? Like, if you can just get somebody who you're like, worst case scenario, like Pro Bowl alternate on special teams.
See ball, get ball, go tackle.
Totally. And I think maybe there's something to be said for that and the position of safety. Like, you should not be playing safety if I don't think that you're going to be a great special teams player as well.
Yeah, you have to be able to.
Maybe we just came up with a theory.
Safety is just incredibly uncomfortable. You're in a lot of space, you're on an island, and if you miss the tackle, it's over. And that's why it's truly one of the most thankless positions. It's so tough.
It's why they're destiny. As for mine, I'm going to go with Ashton Davis. Familiarity. He's a Santa Cruz kid, played at Cal. That helps as well. When you're
I liked him coming out of the draft. I talked to him at the NFL Combine that year. It didn't quite pan out, but he's got some athletic upside. And
I remember him at Cal. He was a hell of a player. And Justin Wilcox, he has really good defensive players that they come into the league and they were underdrafted because they don't have all of that athleticism that everyone wants from the SEC and the Big Ten schools, really just the SEC schools. And then guess what? These guys know how to play football, and it translates in. So we're going to be taking a closer look at Cal players, but I think Ashton Davis, an established Cal player, again, coming back home to the Bay, would be just an easy fit on a totally reasonable, never going to worry about it contract. You'll cut guys who will cost twice as much as him coming out of camp. And then you got to go with the number one. If you have the opportunity to take the best player on the board and it's not particularly close at a position of need, I know you need defensive tackles. I know you need offensive linemen. I know you need a lot of things.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a player like Malachi Starks under any other circumstances.
And before we close out, there's a lot of time left to see how this thing shapes up.
Totally.
To me, a defensive tackle feels like there's Mason Graham, who's I would say he's probably going to go top 10. The way it's shaping up, he should. He's the only defensive tackle I think you would consider it at 11. And we can talk more about him. I think I'm probably higher on him than you.
No, I like Graham a lot. We're in agreement that he should be a top 10 pick, so I can't dislike him.
But he's the only one at 11 I think you should consider. And then outside of that, is this a team that is going to consider offensive tackle at 11? They might want to draft down if there's that spot. And I'm not sure that there's.
Well, we talked about it, Jake. I mean, Membu, who you can play a guard to start and then slide over, that's something. Again, by the way, he tested in at almost 6'4" at the Senior Bowl. None of those measurements Missouri was taking were fake.
He's gonna be awesome. I'm just saying, it's not like there's a clear answer there, and I do think bringing in Saleh, knowing how much you've had to worry about the defense, and thinking that realistically on your offense, you're going to return most of the talent, at least in the short term. I think they really, if Starks is there, that's something they would be irresponsible not to give real consideration to. And also, if he's there, you can trade down a spot and then curse yourself like you did with the Tristan Wirfs trade down. Remember that one?
Yeah. It
did help them get Brandon Ayuk, but
I would have rather had Tristan Wirfs. I guess you won't have Trent Williams. I don't know. We can play the sliding doors game forever, but they are in a bit of a no man's land at 11. I would say everything from 8 on becomes kind of a no man's land, and the one player who is unquestionably the best at what they do in that, I would say 8 to 16 range, maybe even 20, is Starks.
It's also
and you need a safety.
There's a 100% chance he makes you better immediately.
Yes.
If that's the question, he's the answer.
You know how I was saying with Castro, worst case scenario, you have a special teams player. Malachi Starks will never play special teams.
No.
You are not putting him out there and risking injury to that guy on special teams. It is just one of those things where you go, oh, well, he's too good for that. And you can see that on his Georgia tape. He's too good for special teams.
And I thought about it last year, and Jair, his play kind of ruined it. And I know that's harsh, but I was thinking about they are building, and it's not Legion of Boom, but at all. And I'm not saying it's ever going to get there, but I'm saying with Lenore, with Renardo Green and Malik Mustafa, if you add Malachi Starks to that is an unfathomably good young secondary. And the way, in a league that is testing more and more your secondary, and you're asking more and more to cover, and I think you can play a lot more man covers than you did, and Saleh's going to be willing to do that a little bit more. That's a damn enticing proposition.
Especially too when you consider the depth at defensive tackle in this draft and linebacker, where you don't feel like you have those top end guys, but your second round pick, your third round pick, you can go to the well there and feel like you're not giving up too much. and get some guys in there for depth because you're going to want to rotate them, right? But with a guy like Starks, you don't want to be rotating him. You want him on the field 100% of the time. Got to take it into consideration. We got a lot of other stuff we got to take into consideration. We got to take cornerbacks, wide receivers, running backs, offense, just a lot of stuff. So you got to subscribe.
In the comments, let us know players, positions, what you want us to cover next. We're deep in the bowels of draft tape. You didn't like that at all. I think
I would like to remove myself from the bowels.
I think our sickos do.
Evacuate me, please.
We're grinding East-West Shrine Bowl tape.
Senior
Bowl. Senior Bowl's coming. There's a lot of good stuff. This process is ramping up. Comment, subscribe, become an official sicko, whatever. Let us know what you want us to cover.
Official sickos. If an official sicko wants a specific player breakdown, they get a specific player breakdown.
Yes.
So that's all the reason you could ever need to become an official sicko. I mean, it's almost like a cameo, except public.
That's right. Anyway.
All right. We got some tape to grind. We'll talk to y'all soon.